In this video we're going to be looking at how aggregate supply side policies can be used to target each of the economic goals, which ones that will help, which ones that may hinder, and which ones that might sort of have an element of both. So as a general rule, supply side policies should promote sustainable growth and will generally promote inflation, although some of them can boost inflation in the short term. They can hurt full employment, but in the long term they should help. They also can hurt equity in the short term, although should provide benefits in the long term. And generally, supply-side policies will improve external stability. So first of all, we're looking at growth and inflation together here, or sustainable growth. In the short term, if policies are going to make us more efficient and lower costs of production, it should help to improve efficiency. So some policies, for example, like trade liberalisation or incentives to increase the size of the labour force or immigration, all of those things should help boost supply straight away and help to increase our supply side potential and lower costs of production for businesses. However, there are some policies that will boost aggregate demand in the short term. So for something like infrastructure, it's not going to have the supply side benefits until the actual project is built. Lower taxes as well, like lower income taxes or lower company taxes, can promote investment and consumption, which can cause some inflation in the short term. So it's important to recognise that some policies that are focusing on supply, like immigration, and trade liberalisation, should reduce inflation straight away. There's more competition for jobs and there's more competition for our products. However, other policies like infrastructure and lower taxes can cause some demand pull inflation in the short term. In the long term, though, it's meant to be all positive for inflation and growth. So the idea is that we're able to achieve increased growth without inflation, which helps to boost our productive capacity, helps to make us more productive, and therefore creates increased demand for goods and services, so promotes our international competitiveness, and it should promote decrease inflation because things like infrastructure spending will make us more productive and reduce bottlenecks. Lower taxes will boost participation rates. All of these things should help to decrease inflation and therefore promote aggregate demand because of the lower prices. And that will allow for more sustainable and long-term economic growth. And you can make that link to any type of supply-side policy. So it's important to recognise that many supply-side policies actually will increase aggregate demand in the short term before they have positive supply-side benefits for the economy. So tax concessions for private investment, for example, can cause more aggregate demand in the short term because there'll be more investment spending, and that can cause some short-term pressure on prices. And that's the same with infrastructure spending as well. Once technology begins to contribute to the production process, it should help to lower costs of production. Full employment. Often these supply-side policies are involving increasing participation, and that can mean more people are looking for jobs. So, for example, if we increase immigration, that can cause more unemployment in the short term, structural unemployment, because there's more competition for jobs. It's all about promote efficiency rather than employment. If we're trying to be more efficient with our use of our policies, so we could be using more automation or the removal of tariffs. Both of those can lead to more unemployment, because in this case you might get replaced by capital. In this case, more people might be buying imports, and that can increase unemployment in the short term. A lot of these policies will also often lead to growth, but jobless growth, because it might be involved with increasing our output, but we're using less employees because we're using more capital to be more productive. So it's not always going to benefit employment in the short term, because we're trying to promote efficiency, which can lead to more automation. It can lead to tariff cuts, which will lead to more competition for jobs and more competition from foreign imports as well. In the long term, because of the lower cost of production, and this is basically always the same, it should help to boost aggregate demand because of the lower prices. That will increase the derived demand for labour and boost employment because of our increased international competitiveness. Equity sort of flows on with employment. It can be negative in the short term because there's more unemployment, and that can lead to more people living on transfer income. You've got to link it really well to the goal and maybe not be able to achieve a dignified standard of living. That can be involved with things like tariff cuts or immigration, which could lead to more unemployment. In the long term, one key good thing for equity is it lowers prices. So low income earners benefit because they're often the ones that have a higher propensity to consume and can benefit from the increased purchasing power. It should also help to create jobs in Australia in the long term. And the idea that our prices are low will help to boost demand and output levels, and therefore less people will rely on welfare, and therefore there'll be less. It should reduce the Gini coefficient and help low-income earners. So short-term it can be negative because there's more unemployment, and that's generally things like tariffs, lower tariffs, and immigration. But in the long term, lower prices, which is good for low-income earners, increased demand for labour because of lower prices, increased international competitiveness, less people are on welfare, and that helps to reduce the size of the Gini coefficient. External stability, again, some of these policies will increase import spending in the short term. So, for example, if we try to lower income taxes to promote supply, or trade liberalisation where there's lower tariffs, we can actually import more in the short term, and that can hurt the current account deficit. But in the long term, it sort of flows through the same things. We have lower inflation, which will increase our international competitiveness and boost net exports. It should help to improve the balance on goods and services because we're importing less and exporting more. That will reduce the size of the CAD, and then that should flow on to reduce net foreign debt. And because we have less net foreign debt, there's less need to borrow from overseas, which will help to keep our interest repayments down, and again will flow through the net primary income account. So in the long term, aggregate supply policies should help us to achieve external stability because they will keep prices down, keep low inflation, boost exports, reduce imports, lower the CAD, and less pressure on net foreign debt. Overall, aggregate supply policies and living standards, in terms of material living standards, we should be promoting a greater volume of goods and services and also be doing it at lower prices. And both of those things will boost our material living standards. Average income should rise in the economy and real GDP per capita should expand because more people have access to employment and we're more competitive. Non-material living standards, it could hurt in the short term, potentially, because if we're promoting greater efficiency, people might have to work harder and therefore they might be more stressed. But in the long term, the idea is that some of these supply side policies will make the workforce more flexible and therefore hopefully should make the working environment more enjoyable. It should also lead to less environmental destruction if we can employ environmental policies and things like that are going to preserve our long-term environment. So it should help non-material living standards because it boosts employment and lowers prices. It should help non-material living standards if it can help clean up the environment and give people a bit more flexibility and choice in their work practices, despite some negative implications in the short term if people have to work harder and more productively.